Can't see Professor. Okay, there we go. All right, so I think that's good. Okay, I'm ready to get started. All right. So hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Tess McRae and I use she, her pronouns. And I am so sorry that I can't be here with you today in person. I unfortunately was exposed to COVID, but it's really great to see you all. And I'm here today to present the culmination of my INDS degree in civic renewal and creative expression, which is my capstone titled Fostering Agency and Connection Through Art Making. So I first want to start with some thank yous. This project is actually the first formal step on a journey that has really taken a lifetime. And I have so many people I want to thank. So I want to start with my three amazing faculty mentors, Dr. David Hoffman, Dr. Romy Hubler, and Professor Leah Purpura, as well as my INDS faculty advisor, Professor Stephen McAlpin. And I also want to say a really big thank you to the INDS faculty who are listed on the right side of the screen, as well as my family, friends, colleagues, peers, and community. I really cannot have done this without your help and support, so thank you so much. So I want to start by asking you to take a look at this image. And this is an illustration from the book Unflattening by Nick Susanis. And you can see that it's sort of a school setup where there's a teacher on the left side of the screen who's sort of spewing information to the students on the right side of the screen. And the students are bent over and sort of copying every single word, and they're not even looking at each other or acknowledging that they're in a room together. And so this illustration is an example of agency, or rather the lack of agency, which can be defined as the capacity of ordinary people collectively to transcend the institutions and cultural forces which cast them as mere objects or tools, and to create and exert power in action. So you can see that these students are not transcending those forces. They are not creating and exerting power in action. The sort of setup of the room is constraining them, and this is the only way they can show up, where they're bending down and writing down every word, and they aren't really able to tap into or access their full humanity. And so this is exactly what I wanted to look at in my project. I wanted to determine what traditional age undergraduate students believe about their agency based on experiences like this. And from that sense, I wanted to explore how art making can help traditional undergraduate students to change those beliefs. So practices like writing or making music or drawing or doing theater, how those practices can really help someone to tap into their own agency when it might be constrained and inaccessible to them otherwise. So I really saw myself as working with two different groups of disciplines, and I'm going to go into detail about each one of them. So the first one is civic studies, which is really the exploration of how we can come together as members of the community and co-create a thriving democracy. And so the disciplines that I saw as part of this group were political science, sociology, psychology, and philosophy. And those really get at just how agency happens and how community works and sort of what we bring to that. And I've listed out some of the relevant experts here, and I'll go into detail about them in just a moment. And the second group that I really saw myself working with was creative expression, which is the exploration of how words and images and sounds and movements can actually be symbols, can be imbued with meaning so that we can communicate our emotions and experiences. And so the disciplines that I saw as part of that were English, visual arts, and performing arts, and I've listed the relevant experts here as well. So in conducting my research, I sort of saw, especially on the civic studies side of the house, that there were two different sort of ideas about how art can be used in civic engagement. And so I've pulled out two sources that really represent an entire body of work. And the one on the left is called The Beginner's Guide to Community-Based Arts. And it is a book by Keith Knight, Matt Schwartzman, and many other scholars and artists. And that book really gets at how art can be used as a tool when you go into communities and do community service. And it's something where you can get people engaged just for a moment and help them to create things like a mural or a collective theater performance. And that's great. But on the right side of the screen, we have the Civic Learning and Democratic Engagement Theory of Change, which is written by David Hoffman, Jennifer DeMargo Goldman, Stephanie King, and Verda Robinson. And it also, there's an entire movement, I would say the civic studies movement is really built off of this theory, as well as several other works. And David, Romy, and I, through the Center for Democracy and Civic Life, continue to build on that. And the theory of change really gets at how our everyday practices and relationships can be a forum for civic engagement. And so I really saw this difference between art being a tool versus art being a forum. And so I found that really interesting. And I'll talk about that a little bit later in this presentation. So for my capstone project, I put together a portfolio which included a literature review and an evaluation of the scholarship of interdisciplinarity present in my project. But really, what the centerpiece of my project was a workshop called the Creative Expression and Civic Empowerment Workshop. And I developed this with the help of my faculty mentors. And it's really designed to get students thinking about their personal stories and able to access them through art making, which really gets at their lived experiences in a way that might not be afforded by everyday conversation. And what I wanted to do, I put together a workshop and then I actually facilitated it on April 7th with a group of undergraduate students. And I'll go into a little bit of detail about what all of that was like. And then based on that experience, I put together some facilitation guides so that anybody can facilitate this workshop based on my experience on April 7th. And I'm working on right now developing a website where the facilitation guides and all of the information will be housed so that it can be a really great resource. So this is sort of a breakdown of the different parts of the workshop. Started out with some welcome and introductions, and then there were really these two questions that I wanted everybody to answer. And so the first one was sort of everyone went around and shared a work of art that stirred an emotion in them and why. And we talked about how art does not have to be just one thing. It can be so many things can be art, and like our societal concept of art can be very constrained sometimes. But we talked about all of these different genres and things that we might not always consider as art. And then we went into an art making activity and answered a prompt about agency, about a moment in our lives when we really felt like we could be true to ourselves and not have to worry about other people's expectations. And then we wrapped up the workshop with a group reflection on the entire experience. So this is a picture of all of the materials laid out on the table. I had 9 amazing participants with me, and we did this workshop together, and this is what they used to create their art pieces. And here are some examples of the pieces that people created in the workshop. And I want to draw your attention to the middle one, the purple one especially. This person was one of 3 people who did their art piece about their hair, talking about how they were able to take agency over their hairstyle, and that really helped them to access agency in other areas of their lives. And I really liked what this person did. They used string, they used yarn to sort of represent the weight of their hair before they shaved their head, and then they used a really light material to communicate how freeing it felt when they were able to do that. So I thought that that was very cool. And here is an awesome quote from my workshop from one of the participants. I had a really great moment just thinking about myself and connections to other people in our experiences. I think sharing stories through art creates a situation where you can better empathize with someone. While I do not understand their experiences from having lived them, I can relate. So that was really exciting to read because that was exactly what I was trying to accomplish through my workshop. So I want to talk a little bit about the scholarship of interdisciplinarity present in this project. And interdisciplinarity is really about combining different concepts and theories and frameworks from different disciplines to integrate them and create something new from that. And so I felt like that was really important to what I was trying to do. And the type of interdisciplinarity that I saw myself working with was critical interdisciplinarity, which is really about interrogating sort of the conventional and dominant structures of knowledge and education and finding ways to transform them. And so going back to that illustration that I showed you at the beginning of this presentation, that is exactly what I was trying to do. I know that I and many of my peers have experienced environments like this that have constrained our sense of agency, and I really wanted to question if that is really the best way to get about it, and to explore how art making can sort of transform this environment and transform how students conceive themselves and how students are thought about sort of in education as a whole. So I saw myself really using 2 different interdisciplinary strategies here, and I'll talk about each of them. The first one is bridging the explanation action gap, which is sort of a strategy where you cast different disciplines. Some of them you identify as having explanatory leverage, so they sort of give you a sense of what the problem is or what the issue is, and then you have the action-oriented disciplines which guide interventions and solutions. And so going back to those 2 different categories that I talked about at the beginning of this presentation, the civic studies I really saw being the explanatory piece, where it was sort of getting at the contours of agency and how agency happens and works. And then creative expression I saw is really guiding the solution to how we can help students access their agency when maybe the environments they've been part of have not allowed for that. And then the other strategy that I saw myself working with was redefinition, which is when you identify a commonality between two different disciplinary concepts, and then you are able to bring out a relationship between them. And so I want to take us back to the theory of change, which gets at, which explains what the best civic learning and democratic engagements are likely to be. And it outlines that these are integral, relational, organic, and generative. And so what I was really trying to do through this project was not only to assert that art can be a tool, but also that it can be a forum that fits this sort of framework. And in that way, I was redefining what civic engagement is and what actions count as civic engagement. So that was what I was trying to do through my project. So I took away a lot of insights from this experience, but I'm going to talk about two of them. The first one is just my own experience of claiming my own agency through this project. This was the first time that I had ever developed my own workshop or facilitated it by myself without having any of my colleagues or anyone like there to see it. And so it was definitely a very scary experience, but it was also a really great learning experience and helped me to sort of think about how I can do a better job of really internalizing my own agency and taking ownership of my authority as a facilitator. And the second thing, which I think is a really great summary of my project and is also exemplified in the research of Jessica Hoffman Davis, is this idea that art is not just the means of civic engagement, but it's also the ends. And so it's really, again, not just about the tool, but about the forum and how art can sort of be both. So I mentioned that I am putting together a website to sort of house the facilitation guides and all of this other information about my workshop. And I'm hopeful that in the future, wherever I go after I graduate, I will be able to facilitate this workshop myself and maybe develop other workshops and sort of build on this research through that way. And also, this idea of a workshop to begin with was really the third idea in a series of several other ambitious ideas that I unfortunately was not able to carry out through this project. So that included a community theater troupe and a performance that would come from that, as well as a night of poetry. And so I'm really hopeful that wherever I go next, I will be able to bring both of those ideas to light and build on that research as well. So here's a bibliography for this presentation. And here is a collage of really the full range of pieces that were created through my workshop. And with that, I want to say a really big thank you. I'm really glad that you were all here, and I would love to hear any questions that you have.
All right, we have unmuted the room and we will take note of questions online as well. Anyone here have a question for Tess? I know, Tess, you can't see us, but we will let you know. Okay, question in the room from Susu Abler.
Through your research, any way in which like this, how to potentially apply it in an educational context or in the classroom, if that's something you would consider doing?
Can someone, I can't hear very well, can someone repeat the
Yeah, so if you do have a question, you'll come up to using the microphone on this computer here. All right, go ahead and ask again.
Hi, Tess. So I know you talked about doing this research in sort of an educational context. So through your research, did you find that this was applicable in the classroom? If so, is that something you would consider doing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think most of the research actually that I was looking at was talking about sort of the student experience and how, especially in classrooms, the arts can be a way to really get students engaged and thinking about what they can contribute. And so, yeah, I think that is something that I would love to continue doing. Most of my experiences, I mentioned at the beginning that this is sort of a journey that has taken an entire lifetime, and I feel like just by virtue of being a student, a lot of the settings that I've worked in have been sort of educational settings, and that's something that I actually would really like to continue doing. So thank you.
Hey, anyone else in the room have a question? Oh, Professor McAlpin.
Can you hear me, Tess?
Not well. Can you come a little closer?
Come closer.
Thank you.
So my question is, education figures so prominently in your work, and I think you have applied experience in education. Have you taken, or do you plan to take more courses in education? It really is, it can be a transformative force, as you say. So talk to us about your studies of education.
Yeah, so ironically, I have not taken any courses in education. I think that's something that if I could do my undergraduate career over again, I would really want to do that. And I am still thinking about grad school. That's not my very next step. But if I do go to grad school, I think that's something that I would be really interested in learning more about, because I feel like that is just such an important thing that has shaped my own interest in this topic. And I know that that's the same for many others. So thank you.
Okay, Kayla Thomas, you've got a question as well?
Yeah, so in the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that this project was a part of a lifelong journey for you. Can you say a little more about what brought you to this point?
I most certainly can. I actually I have some slides that I didn't end up using. So let me I was gonna find a way to use this maybe, but this is a collection actually of a whole bunch of artwork that I've done, and I was gonna talk a little bit about my own background. But this has really, I've always loved to draw and make art and sing and make all sorts of types of music, and I've also really always loved theater. And so this interest brought me in high school. I don't know if I don't know if people can see my mouse, but at the top right of the screen, you can see these three sort of things that say the vision. And so in high school, I joined my school's literary magazine, which was just starting up. And that was really the thing that not only got me confident about sharing my own art with other people, but also it was like a really great way to see how art and community can intersect and how important art is to community building. And so that was in an educational setting as well. And we were able to create a really strong community through that. And I loved that experience so much. It really is the foundation for, I think, everything I do. And after I graduated high school, I got connected with the Center for Democracy and Civic Life at UMBC and several other organizations and classes like Leah's, where I was also sort of making art in community. And so you can see here, this is like a broad range of art that I've created during my time at UMBC, which also includes some illustrations of campus spaces that students help to shape. And so I feel like sort of where my niche is creating art that really gets at the story of how community building happens and what it means to be part of the UMBC community in particular these last few years. Thank you.
Tess, before we wrap up, can you just tell us about what you've got on display here on campus at the Commons?
Yes, absolutely. So I just mentioned the where my niche is sort of illustrating how different community spaces come to form. And what I have, it's sort of in the project that I've been doing for my entire time at UMBC in paralleling this degree, is that I illustrated through the Center for Democracy and Civic Life several different spaces and campus traditions and landmarks that are important to the UMBC community that students help to shape. And so that collection of artwork actually was on, it was an exhibition at Okamoka in the winter of 2020, and it is currently on display in the Commons on the second floor right next to the Center for Democracy and Civic Life office. So you can see the top left image and the bottom right image are there, as well as several others.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Tess.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, we're going to move on to our next